From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report for our final 2019 AgriTalk U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow stop. And we're entering the sea of red for this roadshow. We have a lot in store from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln over the next 60 minutes. A big controversy for corn over ethanol as the feud between oil refineries and renewable fuels heats up, with some saying it's EPA's word over USDA's. China is in the market to buy U.S. soybeans as big buys and shipments could soon take off. It's a greenhouse and lab that's unique and powerful.
Sometimes if we do a project that's multiple months long, it's 2 million images of plants come through.
We'll show you how this phenotyping setup could soon impact a field near you. And the heartache across portions of Nebraska continues.
You spent thousands of probably cleaning, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Rented a scraper to move dirt.
As farmers and producers continue to pick up the pieces from a historic year.
The 2019 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Nebraska is brought to you by the champions of yield, DeKalb Asgrow. Score the next W for your operation. Visit your DeKalb Asgrow dealer today.
Well, we're excited to wrap up our 2019 College Roadshow from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Memorial Stadium here is massive. And on game day, it's known as the Sea of Red. That's as red fills the brim of this stadium. Now, Nebraska football's history does run deep, and they hold the record for the most consecutive sold-out games. But the history extends way beyond Memorial Stadium, and we'll take a look at how the University of Nebraska is already shaping the future of agriculture. But first, for the news, there's been a lot of controversy in Washington this week, including controversy over the new biofuels rules and the backlash that has followed. And that conversation took center stage at the White House for a bit this week. President Trump speaking during a cabinet meeting, saying that plans to recalculate biofuel blending requirements to offset waivers exempting refineries from the mandates is approved, done, and getting ready to be signed, and that the deal is, quote, going to be terrific for the small refiners. The president's comments coming amid biofuel industry complaints over what the EPA has proposed. Among the plans, recalculating blending requirements based on past Department of Energy recommendations on waivers, not the EPA's actual decisions on them.
You first of all committed to and fulfill your promise of making E15 year-round. That's what's really needed to build infrastructure. That's a 50% increase in domestic usage there, which will happen. Good for the economy, good for the air, and good for the ag farmers in that way. You've also balanced up the small refinery waivers with the farmers and RFS, and once they fully understand what you've done here, they'll be fine and as they see it implemented.
EPA Director Andrew Wheeler trying to reassure biofuels groups and others they will get their full allotment of ethanol blending next year. Well, some House leaders want answers when it comes to those renewable fuel standard waivers. A House subcommittee will hold a hearing Tuesday on the Trump administration's plan to reallocate waived biofuel volumes. The hearing was called by 2 House Democrats. They said in a statement, quote, the Trump administration's abuse of EPA's waiver authority is undermining the RFS program and devastating the renewable fuel industry, end quote. Well, China says it has plans to buy up to $20 billion worth of ag products in the next year if the president signs phase 1 of a deal. That's according to Bloomberg sources. That $20 billion would put its imports back to what they were in 2017 before the trade war began. But it's not known when those big buys could actually happen. And President Trump says efforts to end the trade war with China are going well. And China could be making more big buys of U.S. ag soon. Reuters reporting that China has issued a 10 million ton tariff-free quota to import soybeans from the U.S. It comes after President Trump said China had agreed to buy up to $50 billion worth of U.S. farm products after reaching that phase 1 trade agreement. It purchased 264,000 metric tons of soybeans earlier this week. And China is continuing to buy U.S. pork. USDA reporting weekly export sales for pork are at a marketing year high thanks to China. It purchased another 94,000 metric tons. It reports for 2020 net sales were primarily for China as well. Beijing buying 58,600 metric tons. China also buying more than 850,000 metric tons. Well, an update to an ongoing murder investigation, and now a cattle producer from Missouri has been charged with the murder of two brothers from Wisconsin. 25-year-old Garland Nelson of Missouri is charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Nick and Justin Diemel of Wisconsin. The two brothers were first reported missing on July 21st. Investigators say the pair had been visiting Nelson's northwestern Missouri farm while on a trip related to their cattle business. It's alleged Nelson used a skid loader bucket to move metal barrels containing the brothers' bodies to a pasture where he then set them on fire. Investigators say he then dumped the remains on a manure pile and used the skid loader to crush the barrels. Well, more crime and mystery in farm country as thousands of apples and pumpkins have gone missing in Michigan and Indiana. Authorities now saying a well-organized machine of thieves appears to be behind the thefts. First, 50,000 apples were reportedly stolen from an orchard in LaPorte County, Indiana. Now, an estimated 7,000 pounds of apples are reported missing from an orchard in Fenton, Michigan. That happened during the same week that 1,000 pumpkins were taken from another Michigan orchard. Well, definitely some cold shots of air hitting across the country this week, with more cold air heading next week. But what about rain? We'll have a check of weather next.
U.S. Farm Report is presented by the Chevy Silverado and the all-new Silverado HD, the strongest, most advanced family of Silverados ever.
Welcome back. Time now for a check of weather. Well, Cindy, as you can tell, it's a little brisk here in Nebraska, but thankfully they haven't had a lot of rain this week, and that's helped with some harvest progress. But what about rain next week?
Yeah, Tyne, it is looking okay, especially for parts of the western corn belt to get some more of that harvest done this week. Let's start you off, though, with the root zone moisture map. And the real big takeaway over the past week is how much moisture we've seen in the southeast, because this has really been knocked back. The dryness that we've seen there, at least in the top parts of the soil, has been really knocked back there. It still remains very wet in the north central United States all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Now, as far as the longer term drought, we're still really dry, though, as far as the U.S. Drought Monitor is concerned, in the southeastern U.S., also in Texas and in much of the Four Corners region. Let's take a look then at what we have in store for us. Starting you off with the jet stream, we still have a pretty decent trough that's going to be traveling across the nation's midsection, the plains, the upper Midwest. Some pretty cold air going to be moving in as we get in towards Halloween for the Great Lakes region, and then eventually into the northeast. And yeah, then we start to see things warming up just a little bit as we get towards the weekend. Big ridge and in the western United States by the end of the week. Then we start to see things, a little bit of a trough starting to come back into parts of the Great Lakes as we get into the latter part of next weekend. All right, so overall, what we are expecting to see is some wet weather to start off the week as we get into parts of the central and southern plains. And yeah, kind of on the backside of that low, it's going to be cold enough, especially in those higher elevations, for a little bit of snow. Cold air remains in the north central United States. We've got another front that's coming into parts of the northern plains. Now this guy, as we get into Wednesday, becomes this guy, and that means some really cold air coming in to the north central United States. It's a blue norther, so we're going to see that chilly air come all the way down into Texas. The wet weather pretty much with the low pressure and the front on the leading edge of that, with showers and some few thunderstorms down in the warmer air in the south. Notice the drier air, though, in much of the western part of the country. Now, as we get into Friday, lots of areas will be on the dry side as well. We will see another front that kind of comes through the north central United States, so you might get a brief pause in some of that harvest there. It'll pick up more moisture as it moves into the east, but fairly dry weather continuing out in the western United States and actually around the Gulf Coast states as we get into our Friday. Over the next 30 days, temperatures likely to be just a little bit on the cool side in the northern parts. I think especially in the early part of the 30-day period. I think it does warm up a little bit later on. And then above normal temperatures across the eastern seaboard, the Gulf Coast states, and out into the west. Now, as far as the precipitation over the next 30 days, we're going to be on the above normal side, Great Lakes all the way down into the southern plains. We're going to be a bit on the dry side, though, in the northern plains and a bit over into California as well. So not necessarily tying very good news for parts of the eastern corn belt if we are looking at that above normal precipitation. I still see corn out there when I've been driving around, especially around Indiana. So I know we really need that dry weather and not so cold weather to get that late harvest done. Tyne?
Thanks, Cindy. Well, when we come back, our marketing discussion will be from right here at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Chip Flory will join us for a final stop, plus 2 University of Nebraska economists. That's next.
Shop Machinery Pete's Price Slasher Sale now through October 31st, all online at machinerypete.com/sale.
Welcome back to the University of Nebraska, Lincoln for our marketing roundtable discussion. We have Brad, we have Corey, as well as our own Chip Flory joining us this weekend. Brad, I'll start with you because a lot of the news, we talked about the biofuels package and the debate right now.
Right.
Is it truly something that's going to be good for farmers and small refiners? Is there a package that can please both?
Right.
But right now, the controversy surrounding this is not calming down.
No, it's not. It's one of the real risks that we face. We typically think of policy as a way to respond to risk, and in this case, policy is the risk. You have a biofuels mandate that says we're going to grow renewable fuels usage, but you also have pushback that says it's difficult to get to that mandate, or it's a hardship on refineries, and so we have waivers here that have not gotten us up to that mandate, and a continued debate about, well, are you going to enforce the mandate, or are you going to effectively nullify the mandate and give away waivers?
Policy is the risk. And this week, Secretary Perdue was talking to the president, and it was reported that he said, well, just wait until agriculture and farmers really understand this. They'll be fine with it. Is that true, Chip? I mean, is there something in this package and these details that we're missing that agriculture's not okay with that they should be?
Well, number one, I don't know. I don't know if we know all the details of exactly how it's going to play out yet. If we go to the Department of Energy recommendations on waivers, the SREs, I don't know how we're going to get to 15 billion gallons. The 3-year average, rolling average on the SREs in the past will get us home. That's where I think the industry wants to be. I don't know if EPA and Wheeler wants to go there or not.
Brad?
It's uncertain at this point. You certainly have an administration that has heard both a farmer perspective and also a petroleum industry, a refinery perspective. And it's difficult to reconcile the two. So exactly how this reads, we have to wait and find out.
Corey,
but what does it really mean? It'll take a few years to ultimately feel too.
What does it mean? It'll take a few years. Will we get to that 15 billion gallons next year? And I think that's a fear, Corey. If we don't, if we're going to lose some of this demand, what are the risks when you look at corn right now?
I go back to the farmer right now is trying to make ends meet with low prices and highly uncertain yields. Even if they've got anything even planted this year, they might have some more apparent issues right there on the farm that are putting into question their survival. They can manage that. You only can trade what you're faced. You can't wish it's somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
The economics matter. It comes back. You got to survive. If you're going to make money in the future, you better get through this year. This year's a testament to that with the weather that's occurred.
Yeah, and the RFS matters to our market outlook. I don't think there's any question about that. We got to get our margins back for those guys.
RFS matters, so does demand, right?
Yeah.
And we're hearing some big news that maybe phase one of this trade deal with China, that maybe we'll see them buy, I think $20 billion was the number that was thrown out in phase one alone. What would derail the president, though, from signing that agreement next month, do you think, Chip?
Well, as I understand it, it's basically the same agreement that we had with China back in May, and it was the enforcement issues, I think, that made China pull that back. But we're starting to see, we've seen some things happen in the Chinese media. They're talking about buying U.S. agricultural products again.
Right.
That this time, I think it's different. That's how I read it.
And Brad, on the show last weekend, Arlen Suderman said it was like the media was preparing their people to be prepared for a deal to get done and get their support ahead of time.
Right.
So it sounds like that tone is changing. But are you fearful? It's like we've heard it many times. We're going to see this be a done deal. Are you fearful that this could turn left at the last minute?
Well, we've had that experience over the last year of we think we have a deal or we think we have progress and yet we don't. And I think ultimately maybe you're right. The public sentiment seems to be both countries have to be able to declare victory. So if you see Chinese reporting that suggests they see a path towards an agreement, maybe that's the most positive thing we've seen. But still, we have a tremendous amount to do. And even if we have an agreement, even if promises of the purchases come in, you still have a long road to hoe to get back to some of the losses that we've seen in the last 2 years in the trade arena.
So what would be a win, Corey, then to get back to levels we were before the trade war started? I mean, and to not even grow our business there? Is that off the table right now? What would be a win for U.S. Ag?
right now or next year or 3 years. You're faced with what you see today. Make your decisions as the farmer will. And if something better comes along, and it should, everyone's in our court on this, on our side, I think you're going to have good days ahead.
Yeah, Chip.
It's going to take time.
Yeah, I think when it comes to China, if we can just get back to where we were before the trade war started, I'm going to take that as a win, because there's a lot of trade flows that have changed over the last 18 months. We need to get them fixed and get us flowing back down that same path again.
Definitely. All right. Well, we talked a little bit about the biofuels package. John Phipps, coming up on U.S. Farm Report, has his take in John's world. Stay with us. We'll be back with more U.S. Farm Report in just a moment.
Pioneer is proud to work with farmers in the most complex and rewarding industry on earth. From your friends at Pioneer, thank you, farmers.
Well, we talked about it earlier in the show, but the feud over the new biofuels package and what it means for ethanol. But John Phipps has his own take in John's world.
It's been handy to have harvest as an excuse for only pretending to follow the intense political battle over ethanol. The simple truth, however, is ethanol is a bizarre artificial market where Economics 101 is only of slight use. I have tried to wade through the explanation and charts about small refinery exemptions and RFS deals, but either fall asleep or laugh out loud. The rhetoric between ethanol proponents and the EPA is heated and, to my way of thinking, nearly futile. Because this is a market created by politics, it is constantly subject to politics. As political power shifts between bickering constituencies of oil and ag, it will be a steady job for lobbyists and association executives. Nothing has ever been or truly will be settled. Forcing customers to buy something takes some pretty airtight language in the law, and as we are finding out, given time and enough legal horsepower, that seems to be an impossible goal. The current dispute could be child's play, however, to a few years from now, 2023, when RFS mandated volumes will be set at the EPA discretion. By that time, the effect of electric vehicles, the gradually slowing economy, and further trade breakdown could pressure ethanol opponents into even more vigorous political efforts. The failure of biodiesel to come anywhere close to projected volumes will also complicate those future negotiations. The current depopulation trend in rural America will add to ethanol's problems. Ethanol undisputedly triggered a farm income spurt that remains a fond memory for those of us lucky to have experienced it. Keeping that balloon afloat, however, is proving far more difficult than many ever imagined. It is exhausting, and the current disagreement in all its intricacies should have farmers soberly looking at what long-term outcomes could look like. Some of them are not pretty, but then the current situation is hardly reassuring. Frustrating as it is, I think I need to do the homework required to at least follow this dispute. If it is making planning 2020 this challenging, it really raises hurdles to making longer-term strategies.
Thanks, John. When we come back, we're heading back to Illinois for a very presidential Tractor Tales. Machinery Pete joins us next.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we're going to head to West Central Illinois to check out a classic John Deere 8630.
1975 John Deere 8630 that we bought new. It's sentimental to me because I gave President Ronald Reagan a tractor ride in that tractor October 20th, 1982, when he was president. And it all happened because my brother was Illinois Director of Ag, and President Reagan needed a place to come to Illinois and give a speech along with another event he was going to attend. He ended up coming to our farm. I said, well, if he comes, I'll give him a tractor ride. And the White House press guy liked it. Our family was to keep that secret for a month. We couldn't tell anybody. And we practiced that tractor ride every day for a week ahead of the show day at the precise time of day for where the sun was going to be and the best pictures. President Reagan hopped in with me and we went down the field 300 yards and turned around and came back. And we talked about tractors. We're going to make a round with a tractor and chisel plow, but it rained at least an inch the night before. So the chisel plowing that couldn't happen. So we were just going to make, with the chisel plow out of the ground, make a round about 300 yards down the field and turn around and come back.
All right, when we come back, work and research being done right here at the University of Nebraska is digging into drought and the impact of stress. And it's studying everything from corn to even hemp. We'll show you that research next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition. The 2019 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Nebraska is brought to you by the Champions of Yield, DeKalb Asgrow. Score the next W for your operation. Visit your DeKalb Asgrow dealer today.
Welcome back. Well, drought here in Nebraska isn't just a struggle. It actually turns into a battle, and a battle sometimes engulfed in water rights. But here at Nebraska, researchers are honing in on what varieties and hybrids respond best to drought. We take you to the research that currently is in a greenhouse, but could be coming to a field near you.
Behind these doors is a glimpse into the research of the future.
So this is the Innovation Campus Greenhouse, and the main focus here is obviously an innovation, a phenotyping system.
This phenotyping system is measuring plants' responses to weather extremes that could impact everything from corn and sorghum to wheat and even hemp.
So with the hemp, obviously it's the new crop for a lot of folks that are considering it.
Whether it's hemp or wheat, the plant goes on a journey to capture 4 different types of images, and it all starts here.
So the first chamber that the plants go through is the IR chamber, and this basically takes the temperature of the plants. We can use that to assess the transpiration rates of the plants, evaporation out of the pots, things like that, that directly translate to how much water the plant is using.
From there, the plant travels to the fluorescent chamber, capturing images like this.
And here the booth shines blue light onto the plants, and they emit a red light. Our cameras can pick up the red light, and in the image, wherever the red is brighter, that's where the plant is photosynthesizing more.
Stop number 3 is what's called a visible chamber, capturing typical images like you take on your cell phone.
We use these to measure growth rates of the plants from day one as a seed all the way to maturity.
The final stop of the phenotyping journey may be the most important.
They then go into the hyperspec chamber, which is similar to an X-ray of the plant.
Duffy says the chamber scans the plant at various wavelengths, revealing the water and nutrient content of that plant.
So typically speaking, if you wanted to measure the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium in a plant, you'd have to harvest it, send it off to a lab, and 2 weeks later you'd get your results. We can do it with a live plant and never have to touch the plant.
And it's that image plus the phenotyping chamber that can accommodate plants up to 9 feet tall that makes this setup so unique.
Well, our system is a little different because it has the hyperspectral camera. So for instance, NASA, when they say, hey, we found a new planet and it's made of gold. Well, obviously NASA's not there because those planets are way, way, way. They use the same kind of technology.
The journey of the plant is the same every time.
Every plant that goes through the system every day gets listed in this database, and each one opens up and shows all the different images we took of that plant for that day.
But the number of images and the amount of data captured can be astonishing.
Sometimes if we do a project that's multiple months long, it's 2 million images of plants come through.
Images not stored on a cloud.
All physicals.
But images and data that have to be downloaded and digested by researchers like Andrew Hawk, who's digging into wheat.
I researched the effect of high nighttime temperature and also more generally heat stress during grain development in winter wheat.
Funded by National Science Foundation, the findings of his research could impact wheat fields from coast to coast.
Basically, the high nighttime temperatures will rob the wheat of some yield or yield potential, and then we want to see how large that effect is. And this particular wheat population is a diverse representation of North American winter wheat. So we'll be able to perform genetic mapping to see if there's any differences in the genetics of the wheat that make it either more susceptible or more tolerant to the stress.
Research being done today will hopefully reveal the answers of tomorrow.
It's estimated by 2050 we're going to need twice as amount of food on the same amount of land. So we've got to make some pretty big leaps in order to get that done.
With research Duffy hopes will bring groundbreaking science.
I love the work I do here and knowing that, we are developing more drought tolerant plants and more nutrient resistant plants, and all sorts of things like that. It really makes a difference in the ag field.
In a field he's grown to love.
All right, when we come back, round 2 of our marketing discussion from right here at the University of Nebraska. Welcome back to our final 2019 AgriTalk U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow stop from right here at University of Nebraska, Lincoln. The sun's come out, the weather's nice, setting the stage. But we'll talk about it coming up on the program. Farmers here in Nebraska have faced some challenges this year. When you look at the flooding and some of the other economic issues that they've had, when you look at net farm income today, let's look at the reality of it. Do you think there's going to be some Nebraska farmers that don't survive this challenging year?
It's clearly been a challenging year on net farm income. Even more so, we could say without the federal assistance, the trade assistance package, net farm income would even be down over last year, which was already struggle enough. So we've seen multiple years now of accumulating losses, accumulating hardship in terms of financial position, and more strenuous or more challenging management decisions as a result. That's put more producers on the edge, and that certainly has increased the number of hardships out there. We still have to recognize that the sector as a whole has been strong, and even in the midst of weather challenges, production challenges, trade challenges, market challenges, it's still been very resilient and coming from a strong base, and we're thankful for that. But definitely we're dealing with more challenges than we have.
But what if we wouldn't have had those market facilitation program payments this year?
Then we would have seen even a greater percentage, a substantially larger percentage that aren't cash flowing, that are looking at more stringent, more challenging financial positions.
Yeah.
It's tough, Chip. Back in Missouri, and I know here in Nebraska, those farmers that don't have anything to harvest. You see the weeds popping up, just such a depressing look. They're going to start 2020 in the hole. When you're not harvesting a crop, and some of them had already purchased some of those inputs.
You mean the prevent plant payment isn't going to make them whole?
Exactly. So that is what I want to talk about.
That
was the big headline. But you talk to some of these producers, and they say, no, that is not the case.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think Brad said it really well. You get that continual decline in farm income. It's something that's very difficult to overcome. The livestock industry in some areas has helped out, but then all of a sudden, the cattle were struggling there for a while. We're getting the feed yards back, but it's been a long road.
Yeah, Corey, what are you most concerned about when you look at risk management in 2019 for Nebraska producers?
What you see now is going to come back again, and you got to be ready for it in the future, because there's nothing changing. Our system is going to evolve, and it's only going to evolve if by the strongest. There's people hurting right now. And if you're not hurting, stress yourself, find that net income of what it would be, and can you survive that stuff? Because there's nothing saying that things are going to get any easier going forward.
Brad, what's your biggest concern for producers as we head out of 2019 and into the new year?
Well, we have a number of decisions to make, and one of those is certainly financial. Where do we sit? How well positioned are we for the coming year? I also focus on ag policy, and we're focusing on a new farm program. Sign up and enrollment decisions are happening right now. And the more we know, the better decisions we can make, but that's also a bit of an uncertainty. And then I focus on risk management. And one of the risk management challenges is we think about production in this silo, we think about farm programs in this silo, we think about crop insurance in this silo, we think about marketing over in this silo, and we forget that they all add to the same bottom line. We're trying to figure out each one oftentimes independently. Yeah. And we're not thinking about the portfolio as a whole.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this weekend. We really appreciate it for our final College Roadshow stop. Stay with us. We have much more when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Well, while many Nebraskans will be cheering on the Huskers this weekend, it's definitely been a challenging year for many farmers and producers here in Nebraska. It's amazing on the drive up here from Missouri to see all of the fields still suffocated by water and roads still being repaired. But when the flooding first hit, one Nebraska hog producer was forced to check on his herd by boat. National reporter Betsy Gibbon has been following this story since the floodwaters first rushed in.
John Tyson wastes no time. He talks as he moves from tire to tire.
Just kind of get everything set up and ready to go.
He's in a hurry to harvest, but knows nothing this year has been under his control.
Try and not get run out. First day in the field, say, oh, I should have done that.
Getting to fall has been anything but easy. The farm ground around Tyson's hog barn in Blair is just miles away from the Missouri River. It looks like this now, with some standing water.
This was all water. Last time, yeah, she's got a picture of it. Yeah, there was water here. Well, the boat was parked right there, right in front of our pickups.
While this is the view currently, it's flooded 3 times during 2019. The first back in March, by far the worst. Tyson used a friend's boat to get to his hogs.
He brought it down, he said, just keep it as long as you need it, so.
His hogs luckily on higher ground.
There's a field road right there, and that was kind of a little higher spot, so we were just wanting to know when we get past it so I can let the motor back down, or if we're gonna get stuck.
In March, Tyson made multiple trips per day. Most of the trucks were to haul 15 to 20 feed bags per trip for a total of 80 bags per day. He had just 1,000 head in the barn, feeder pigs, which weighed roughly 50 pounds. Tyson isn't alone facing headaches this year. It started when precipitation and snowmelt in the Missouri River Basin created flooding, floating down the Missouri River. The Army Corps of Engineers increased the amount of water being released downstream, which filled up reservoirs and forced more water to be let go, flooding Tyson more than once.
As soon as it looks like it might be coming up, we were getting the generator in there. We got the feed truck driver on speed dial.
In the months following, Tyson managed to plant where he could, clean up his property, and spend thousands of dollars to repair his own roads to the barn each time it flooded.
You spent thousands on probably cleaning, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Rented a scraper to move dirt.
During a year when farming can be unmanageable, Tyson looks forward to next year, where he can hopefully see fields instead of floodwaters. Reporting for U.S. Farm Report, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. And it's a really depressing and a surreal view to see all of the fields that should be freshly harvested instead taken over by weeds because farmers never got in some of these fields here in Nebraska this year. All right, when we come back, there may be a large population here this weekend for the big game, but what about population growth overall? John Phipps has customer support next.
Remember the population bomb? It turned out to be a dud.
Set yourself up for success by getting an early season win against weeds. Use Corvus with multiple sites of action for enhanced burn down of weeds plus reactivation for end of season rewards.
Your call is very important to us. Please hold.
Well, we talked about it in our Farm Journal report, but work is already being done here in Nebraska to feed a growing and hungry population. But can agriculture really keep up? Here's John Phipps.
Rod Vargo, a plant pathologist from Fort Wayne, Indiana, reminds us of our sad history of predicting population growth. Human populations were in the classic logarithmic growth phase during the 20th century. Global population was 1.6 billion in 1900 and doubled by the early 1960s and was solidly on track to double again in only 30 years. Projections used by governments and agricultural research during my time as an agricultural researcher were for 12 billion by 2020, 24 billion by 2035, and 48 billion around 2048. That's a great observation, Rod. Those of us with a few miles on us remember the near hysteria prompted by Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. Published in 1971 and definitely tainted by prevailing racial attitudes, his now disproven predictions of overpopulation and mass starvation were all too believable back then. But several factors have weakened this forecast. Perhaps the most important was the education of women, especially poor women. To the surprise of demographers, the link between education and fertility has proven solid and strengthening, so much so that fertility rates in much of the developed world are now below replacement level and falling toward that threshold in virtually every other country. The world population is now expected to peak just shy of 12 billion around the end of the century. Although this seems like a lot of people, the equally rapid urbanization of populations could concentrate these extra billions in relatively small areas. Many rural areas could become even more sparsely populated. This is happening here and around the world. As for the challenge of feeding that many more, I suppose hearing about imminent food shortages only to be constantly coping with surpluses, especially grains, all my life has made me skeptical agriculture won't keep up. Just here alone, ending ethanol production could boost food production enormously if we needed it. While climate change and water shortages do threaten some areas, it's hard not to look north to Canada and their expansion of crops formerly limited to the lower latitudes. Personally, I think continued fertility declines could result in slightly lower and earlier peak population, even as people live longer. Regardless, agriculture will not be the reason anyone goes hungry in the future.
Thanks, John. And remember, if you have questions or comments for John, you can email him at mailbag@usfarmreport.com. All right, when we come back, there are some world champions here at the University of Nebraska. We'll introduce you to the team and show you the work being done next.
Hey y'all, Justin Moore here. Get ready to kick up some dust with the Roxor Dirt Roads and a Country Show sweepstakes. Enter now for a chance to win a customized off-road Roxor and 2 VIP tickets to one of my upcoming concerts. Visit roxoroffroad.com/Justin Moore.
Well, the quarter scale tractor team here at the University of Nebraska has pretty big bragging rights. That's because they are the reigning world champions. But the amount of dedication and strategy that goes into this quarter scale tractor team is pretty impressive. And while they may be relishing their win, national videographer Russ Natesco shows us how they're trying to have a repeat performance in 2020.
And what's our pulling capacity going to be?
We're shooting for 3,000 pounds pulling capacity.
It's a quarter scale tractor, and that's just the name of the competition. I don't know that it's really quarter scale. I mean, some of these tractors are pretty huge these days. But all they get to start with is a 31 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine and 2 rear tires and some rules they have to comply with, and they're told, go and design a tractor.
I always kind of knew I wanted to be an engineer of some sort, being as when I was younger. I'd always like to tear into like little remote control cars, rebuild them and stuff, and tinker with things.
So there'll be a joystick plant.
I grew up side by side with my dad, and he owns a mechanic shop back home. I saw him struggle over and over again to find ways to fix what's going wrong all the time. And I wanted to get a chance to put my own input in design for that.
What if we put the battery up here?
The skills that they have to display to be successful are exactly what an engineering team working in industry has to display.
So this is kind of our first rendering of the model that we're going to have for the tractor this year. Basically, this is what we're going to use to get our sheet metal order out and be able to start building it here shortly.
You're not going to get a lot of respect if you show up with the same exact tractor as you did last year. You just bring it again. Especially, I mean, even since we won, we still got to find ways to improve on what we did. I think a lot of that is making a new product and improving on what we had last year.
Ag engineering implies a farm kid. And so as soon as they introduce themselves as an agricultural engineering major, it's just immediately assumed that they have the work ethic and high character that farm kids typically display.
It'll prepare me again for my future career, because I know I'll be working on a team of 5 people once I start my full-time job in June.
They've generally been able to leave this team and go out into an engineering job and find success in it.
How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel like we're doing our job right here, you know, because that's what we're trying to do, is turn out engineers.
Everyone here would kind of become a sort of a smaller family, and everyone knows each other. I just think that's one of the great things that also comes out of it, besides an education factor.
I love seeing these kids graduate, but you know, I love even more seeing them going to one of their weddings a few years later and realizing, well, it's the other quarter scale captains that are the groomsmen or the bridesmaids or whatnot in the wedding. And you know, the relationships that they've built are so strong and lasting through this program.
Thanks, Russ. And they will compete actually in late May for the 2020 championship. Well, a big thank you to the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln, as well as all the universities that hosted our 2019 AgriTalk U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow. It's definitely been a fun trip, and a trip that would not have been possible without the support from DeKalb Asgrow. So from all of us at U.S. Farm Report, thank you for being along on the ride for our 2019 College Roadshow. Join us next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.